In the deepest, most hidden corners of Colorado's national forest, where human footsteps are rare and sunlight pierces the dense canopy only at high noon, nature continues its harsh, eternal cycle. The strong survive, the weak fall. Here, laws aren't written on paper, but in fangs, claws, and the instinct to endure. Yet on one quiet morning, in the heart of that seemingly indifferent forest, a strange sound echoed, faint, broken whimpers, like the muffled sobs of a life slowly fading away. It was a puppy. A golden retriever, barely 8 weeks old, small, honey-colored fur matted with mud, wide dark eyes bewildered, not yet understanding that it had been abandoned by the very hands that once held it close. It didn't know what abandonment meant. It only knew cold. Hunger. Fear. The forest wind cut through its thin coat like icy knives. The rustle of dead leaves underfoot startled it with every breath. There were no hands to stroke its head anymore, no warmth to wrap around its body. Only darkness and the sounds of the deep woods, and a vague, creeping sense that life was slipping away, bit by bit. But the forest, with all its cruelty and mystery, is also a place of the unimaginable. From within the thick underbrush, a shape emerged, graceful as smoke, silent as a ghost in the twilight. A female bobcat, sleek and agile, eyes burning gold like wildfire, her paw steps silent against the decaying forest floor. A bobcat, symbol of solitude, pride, and cold-blooded ferocity. A predator born of wilderness, guided by merciless instinct, untouched by compassion. At least, that's what humans believed. When her piercing gaze landed on the shivering pup beneath the rotting tree stump, a breathless stillness blanketed the woods. In that single moment, every instinct, every law, every hardwired lesson of survival echoed in her eyes. Hunt, or walk away. But what happened next went beyond instinct, beyond the divide between predator and protector, between the wild and the tame. Evergreen tree. In the forest, there are rules that cannot be broken. But sometimes, the heart knows how to bend them. This is not a story about wild instincts. It is a story about what happens when the wild chooses compassion over instinct, when a creature thought discarded finds a family, not from its own kind, but from the most unlikely heart of all. And this is only the beginning. That morning, as the first rays of sunlight quietly filtered through the ponderosa pines, brushing gently against the pine-blanketed roof of a small wooden cabin, Jack Thompson woke as he always did, not to an alarm clock, but to the rhythm of a man whose life had long been entwined with the forest. At 68, Jack was no longer a park ranger. Once a respected guardian of the Roosevelt National Forest, he now lived alone in a time-worn wooden cabin at the forest's edge, a place of quiet where nature was his closest neighbor and memories his only nightly companions. He cradled a mug of hot coffee, his calloused, weather-worn hands holding it with the care of someone who had learned to treasure life's simplest things. In the frosted windowpane, his reflection stared back, silver hair, world-weary eyes, and a deep line at the corner of his mouth, one that might have come from a smile, or sorrow. Rusty, his old Labrador, lay curled by the fireplace, breathing softly, as if guarding his master's dreams. For 12 years, Rusty had never left his side, just as Jack had never truly left the forest, even after he'd hung up his ranger's badge. Jack placed a hand gently on Rusty's head and whispered, "Looks like rain's coming, old friend. Another long day." Rusty lifted his head, cloudy eyes still warm with trust, then settled back down again, content, as always, in the unwavering presence of his human. A crisp autumn breeze slipped through the cabin's drafty doorframe, carrying the damp scent of earth and pine. Outside, the leaves had turned gold, amber, and crimson, the colors of transition, when the forest shows its final brilliance before surrendering to winter's slumber. Jack took his last sip of coffee, shrugged on his worn coat, and pulled on his scuffed boots, preparing to gather more firewood. The storm was forecasted to last 3 days. "Won't be long, Rusty," he said, patting the dog's head. The wooden door creaked open, revealing the world Jack still called home, a vast, living forest filled with whispers of forgotten wonders. But something felt different this morning. No birdsong greeted the dawn, no squirrels darted along the tree trunks. The air was still, so still you could hear a single leaf fall. Jack paused on the porch, drawing a deep breath of the forest chill air, his brow furrowing slightly. The forest is quiet, strange. With his old wheelbarrow, he began stacking dry logs from the shed. But amid the soft thuds of wood against wood, another sound rose, faint, high-pitched, like the whimpering cry of something small and lost. He stopped. His back hunched with age and years of labor, but his ears were still sharp, too sharp to miss that. A low whine. Not a squirrel. Not a bird. He listened again. This time, it was clearer. And something in his chest tightened. Sounds like a puppy? Without a second thought, Jack left the wheelbarrow and made his way quickly toward the sound, toward the edge of the woods, where the trees grew thick and secrets were easily kept. With every step, the cry pulled him deeper, towards something no one could have expected. Fall a leaf on what seemed like an ordinary morning, Jack didn't know he was stepping into a story that defied logic, a story where the heart of a man who had lost everything would begin to heal, thanks to a small, trembling soul lost in the woods, and a mother that wasn't human. 2 days before Jack heard that soft whimper, a dusty blue pickup truck turned off onto a narrow dirt trail, winding deep into the forest, a road rarely traveled, where only brittle branches and the crunch of tires against the forest floor bore witness. Behind the wheel was a man in his mid-30s. His eyes were bloodshot, worn from sleepless nights, or perhaps from something heavier. 3 days of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his wrinkled t-shirt clung to a body tensed with the weight of inner conflict. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the steering wheel, as if fighting something inside. On the passenger seat sat a gray canvas bag, old, its zipper frayed. But more than that, it was moving. And from inside came a faint, broken whimper, choked with fear. "Quiet," the man muttered, not looking at the bag. His fingers tapped anxiously against the steering wheel. Almost there. The truck rolled to a stop in a small clearing, surrounded by a wall of dense, unbroken forest. He killed the engine, took a long, shuddering breath, and opened the door. A blast of cold forest air swept into the cab, carrying with it the musty scent of decaying leaves and damp soil, along with a silence that felt unnatural. The man opened the bag. Inside was a tiny golden puppy, barely moving, wide eyes blinking up in confusion. Its soft fur was dirty, its fragile frame far too thin. It looked up, tail wagging weakly, searching for something familiar, some warmth, some kindness. But there were no arms reaching to hold it. Only a cold hand that grabbed the bag and turned it upside down. The puppy tumbled to the ground, a literal discard. No goodbye. No gentle touch. Just the sound of a body hitting earth. It whimpered, unsure of what had just happened. It didn't know what it meant to be abandoned. Only that the hand that once fed it had turned away. "I can't take care of you," the man said, as if explaining it to himself. $80 to drop you at the shelter. I don't have it. Out here, someone will find you. But even he knew, someone rarely came to places like this. He turned quickly, slammed the truck door, and started the engine. Its roar shattered the stillness. The last trace of him was a trail of thin smoke from the exhaust, vanishing into the cold morning air like a fading apology. The puppy stood frozen for a long moment. Then it sat down, trembling. No more movement. No more warmth. It had been abandoned, not just by its human, but by the entire world it had once trusted. Night came quickly in the woods. The cold seeped through its thin coat. Hunger gnawed at its ribs with every breath. The pup began to walk, stumbling between trees, guided only by a faint, blurry instinct. No destination, no direction, just the will not to stay still and die. It whimpered, then howled. Once. Twice. Until its throat was raw. No one answered. But wild ears had heard. Cloud with rain sometimes, a villain doesn't need to growl or bear a weapon. Sometimes, all it takes is the act of abandonment, for the world itself to rise up and rewrite a fate. As the second night descended over the forest, life seemed to retreat into hollow logs and stone dens. The first winds of winter carried a bone-deep chill, threading their way through the leaves and mossy patches like whispers of ice. Beneath a rotting log, the tiny body of the golden puppy lay curled tight. Its ears drooped, breast shallow and weak, flickering like a dying ember. Its dark eyes blinked slowly at the thick darkness. No hope, no sound, only the creeping quiet of surrender. But the forest was not completely silent. Not far away, under a moss-covered rock arch, a female bobcat emerged from her den. Her form was sleek, steady, muscles flowing beneath a coat of copper-brown fur. Her ears twitched, alert, swiveling to catch the faintest sounds hidden in the night. Behind her, 3 bobcat kittens tumbled about, still speckled, still clumsy, meowing for milk, for play, for comfort. To them, their mother was everything. And to her they were life itself. This year's hunt had been generous. Rabbits, forest squirrels, small birds, plenty to feed them all. That abundance had allowed her to den near the forest's edge, rare for bobcats, who usually avoid the reach of humans. But tonight a sound drifted through the woods that didn't belong. A cry, faint, strange, but somehow familiar. Her kittens played on, oblivious. But the mother froze. Her eyes widened. Ears twitched. That cry stirred a memory. A week ago, one of her kittens had gotten lost. It took her a full day to find it again, starved, shaking, its fur matted with mud. She had cleaned it for hours, wrapping her body around it through the cold night. Now this cry, though not the same, tugged at that same primal place within her. The bobcat crept from her den. Her steps were as silent as shadow, gliding over fallen twigs. Her eyes glowed bright, her nose sniffed the air, her whiskers trembled like living antennae. She followed the sound until she found the scent. Human. But old. Not fresh. Not quite a threat. Entangled in the gnarled roots of a tree, a small shape appeared. A trembling, filthy creature, barely clinging to life. Not a cat. Not wild game. But a puppy, small and weak as a newborn bobcat. The mother bobcat froze. Her eyes narrowed. Her body tensed, ready to strike or flee. This was prey. This was a stranger. This was not her kind. But then, the puppy lifted its head, wide eyes filled with pain and confusion. Its tail wagged, feebly, instinctively, a gesture of pure, unguarded trust. No defense. No fear. Just hope. And something in those eyes shattered everything the bobcat had been taught by instinct. She didn't flee. She didn't attack. She stepped forward. Quietly. Slowly. Her gaze never left the pup. And then, without words, without reason, only guided by something deeper than thought, she made her decision. She lowered her head and gently grasped the pup by the scruff, just as she did with her own kittens. And the puppy, by ancient canine reflex, went limp. No growl. No noise. Just a wild mother carrying a fragile soul not her own, back into the warmth of a den hidden deep in the forest. Paw prints, no shared blood. No shared kind. No past. But in the wilderness where survival is law, one small act of compassion was enough to make the forest itself bow before the quiet miracle called empathy. By the time the bobcat mother returned to the den, the sunset had vanished from the stone walls, giving way to darkness and cold, seeping through every leaf and patch of moss. Her 3 kittens rushed to her, eyes wide, noses twitching, joyfully tumbling toward the warmth of her return. But this time, she brought something else. A new creature, strange smelling, unfamiliar shape, no spots like theirs, no sharp ears, no soft meow. Just a pale yellow ball of fur, curled tightly on the bed of dry grass their mother had made. The kittens froze for a heartbeat. Wild instinct made them cautious. But they were still young, curious, playful, their moods as changeable as the forest wind. They crept forward, step by careful step, sniffing at the still form of the puppy, half-conscious, skinny, with shallow, labored breaths. Its tail wagged faintly, an instinctive gesture of peace. One kitten gave the stranger a tentative nudge with its nose. Not a strike, just a light touch. Then another began licking the pup's matted fur, unthinking, the way they groomed each other in play. The bobcat mother stood close, golden eyes fixed on the group. Her whole body tense, ready to leap in at the slightest sign of danger. But there were no growls. No arched backs. No hissing claws. Only soft mewling. And a strange sight, 3 wild kittens curled around a lost, trembling dog. As the puppy finally collapsed into the soft forest bedding, the mother approached. She leaned in, her nose brushing the pup's forehead, a final test. Then, slowly, she licked its tangled fur. Not just to clean it, but to strip away the cruelty left behind by the hands of man. That entire night, in a cave on the edge of the wild, where survival once reigned above all, something shifted. No more predator or prey. No more boundaries of species. Only 4 tiny lives curled beside a wild mother, trembling gently in one another's warmth, like small flickers of fire holding back the advancing winter. The next morning, before sunlight could reach the treetops, harsh truth returned: the puppy didn't eat raw meat. When the bobcat mother brought back a young rabbit, her 3 kittens tore into it without hesitation, but the puppy only watched, sniffed, then clumsily licked, unsure and unable. Its empty belly finally brought it down again. It crawled close to the bobcat, searching for milk, but her body was not made for it. No reaction. No instinct fit the need. The difference in species, though momentarily bridged, still remained. The bobcat mother stood at the cave's entrance, eyes scanning the trees, ears twitching, listening for something from the earth and sky. She knew this little one would not survive here. But to abandon it again would be no different than ending its life herself. Prince motherhood, whether born of instinct or something more, can stay a predator's fangs. But love, though fierce, may not be enough. Sometimes, to protect, a mother must know when to let go. On the 3rd morning, the forest was still, as if holding its breath for something about to unfold. The wind blew sharp and cold through the stone crevices, carrying with it the soft whimpers of a puppy's empty belly. Now emaciated to the point that its ribs showed through thin fur, the pup's eyes had dulled, its head bobbing, too weak to stay upright. The bobcat kittens had grown used to this odd presence, even curling up beside it now and then, but instinct told them it was fading. The bobcat mother had known that since the night before. She had watched. She had tried tearing soft bits of rabbit meat to feed it. The puppy couldn't eat. She'd let it nurse, just to see. But there was no reaction. She knew. She could not save this life the way her kind could. And that knowledge brought with it pain, something deeper than instinct. All night she had stood at the mouth of the den, eyes gazing into the misty woods, toward the boundary between the wild and the world of humans, just a few miles away. She had smelled humans from that direction before, the scent of burning wood, warm smoke, roasting meat. Not the smell of predators, but not exactly safe either. To bring prey to the human's doorstep was unthinkable. But to do nothing meant the puppy would die. And in her heart, the death of a young one, even one not born of her blood, would leave a wound she couldn't ignore. As the first rays of dawn lit the forest floor, the bobcat mother bent down and gently picked up the pup by the scruff, still breathing, but barely. And so she went. Not deeper into the wild, but the other way, toward man. She moved quickly, gracefully, silently, like a passing spirit. Squirrels fled to their nests. A young bird stopped mid-song. The scent of the wild swept across damp earth with each step, leaving behind not just a predator's trail, but that of a mother risking everything for what she believed was right. Meanwhile, Jack Thompson was following faint sounds through the forest with careful steps. Something in his gut told him this morning wasn't like the others. Rusty, his old dog, had left the cabin ahead of him, limping, but determined, following a scent only a dog's nose could pick up. On the breeze came the smell of something small, young fur, wet earth, quiet desperation. And then, in a small mossy clearing, they met. Jack froze. Just a few feet ahead stood a bobcat, elegant, poised, eyes glowing amber. It didn't growl. Didn't flee. It just stood. Hanging from its jaws, like an offering, was a tiny bundle of golden fur, the puppy, still breathing. Rusty didn't bark. He stood still, too, as if he understood, this was no enemy. This was a message. Jack didn't move. He knew any wrong reaction might shatter the moment. The bobcat stepped forward, toward a patch of soft moss, and gently laid the pup down. It gave one final lick to the top of the puppy's head, a gesture of goodbye, of protection, of passing care. Then it looked at Jack. A long, silent gaze, neither fearful nor pleading. Just trust. Jack couldn't breathe. He had never seen a wild creature act like this. Never felt himself the recipient of something so deliberate, so sacred. A life, being handed to him. Slowly he knelt. Reached out a hand, open, harmless. The bobcat didn't flinch. It watched a moment longer. Then, silently, it turned and disappeared back into the forest. Only when the wild shape had fully vanished into the underbrush did Jack gather the fragile pup into his arms, his hands trembling. "You're safe now, little one," he whispered, pulling it close to his chest. "I won't leave you. Not ever." Evergreen tree between two worlds, wild and human, a narrow path had opened, paved not by words or reason, but by compassion and a mother's instinct. No speech was needed. No language. Just heart. Back at the cabin, Jack Thompson moved quickly across the worn wooden steps. The door swung open with a creak, letting the wind rush in as if the forest itself had followed him home. Rusty was right behind him, quiet, tense, his old brown eyes fixed on the tiny puppy wrapped in an old wool scarf, its first blanket, after 3 days alone in the wilderness. The pup lay motionless, twitching occasionally from cold and hunger. Its pale golden fur was still matted with mud, tangled in clumps. But beneath that life remained, fragile, but defiant. Jack gently placed the small body into a cardboard box lined with towels, setting it near the fireplace. His hands trembled as he lit the fire, not from fear, but from the wave of emotion building inside him. "Hang in there, kid," he whispered, as if trying to convince his own heart to stay steady. Decades of being a ranger had taught him many things, including how to keep fading creatures alive. He mixed a solution of warm water, salt, and a touch of sugar, a simple emergency remedy that had once saved babied birds, forest squirrels, even a fawn or two from the brink. He pulled an old syringe from the kitchen drawer, no needle, and carefully squeezed a few drops at the corner of the puppy's mouth. 1 drop. Then another. Then 10. It swallowed. Its lips trembled. Its eyes fluttered. Jack's chest ached, but he didn't stop. Rusty lay down beside the box, resting his head at its edge. He let out a slow sigh, a gesture that felt both like empathy and a silent offering of warmth from someone who had once been small, lost, and rescued too. Jack didn't leave the pup's side all night. Around 3 a.m., the miracle happened. The puppy licked his finger. Not forcefully. Not fully aware. But it was the first sign of life returning. Jack laughed, a strange, sudden sound in the cabin, a home used to nothing but crackling firewood and an old dog's breath. He dropped his head into his hands, exhaling as if lifting a weight no one else could see. "You're a survivor, aren't you?" he murmured. "A stray, but one that never gave up." The next morning, as golden light spilled over the forest edge, Jack gathered his old field kit and prepared to take the puppy to the nearby vet clinic. Though the pup's greatest wounds were hunger and exhaustion, he needed to be sure there was nothing worse beneath the surface. At the clinic, Dr. Elena Martinez, who'd cared for Rusty since he was a pup, took the little dog into her arms, her brow furrowing as she examined it. "About 8 weeks old. Skin and bones. Severely dehydrated. But the heart's strong. Reflexes are sluggish, but that's just fatigue. You brought him just in time, Jack." Then she glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "You said a bobcat brought him to you?" Jack nodded slowly. "I know how it sounds. But you didn't see the way she looked at me, Elena. She wasn't afraid. She trusted me." The vet said nothing. She just stroked the pup's head gently, smiling softly when it whimpered and wagged its tail ever so slightly. "What's his name?" she asked. Jack paused. Then looked out the window, to where the pines danced in the morning wind. He thought of the bobcat fading into the trees like a dream, of the first cry in the stillness of the woods, of the search that brought him back to something he hadn't realized he'd lost. "Scout," he said, "because he came from a place no one expected. And because he led me back to something I forgot, my faith in miracles." Dog face from an abandoned soul, Scout became a symbol of life, of belief, and of bonds that defy species, instinct, and even the weight of past pain. Autumn passed slowly over the Colorado mountains. The season's first snow blanketed the pine trees, and morning frost clung to the fogged windows of the old cabin. And within that world, of forest winds, warm fires, and the steady breath of nature, Scout grew up. From a puppy that once lay silent in the arms of a wild mother, Scout had become a young golden retriever, alert, agile, and full of spirit. His golden fur shimmered in the forest sunlight, and his eyes lit up each time he darted through brambles, lungs full of pine-scented air. Jack watched him every day. He often sat on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes quietly following Scout as the dog sat at the forest's edge, a habit unchanged since the day he recovered. No barking. No pacing. Just watching. Some mornings, Jack would see him sit for long minutes, eyes fixed on the woods, as though waiting for a voice only he could hear. "You still remember, don't you?" Jack would murmur. "She, the first one who saved you." Scout wouldn't respond. Just a slight wag of the tail, a wordless yes. The reunion. And then, one winter morning, when the air was biting cold but sunlight poured gold over the snow, Jack awoke and called Scout as usual. No response. No soft paw steps. The blanket at his feet was cold. Rusty, older now, only raised his head. No worry. No alarm. Just a quiet knowing in his eyes, it's time. Jack grabbed his coat, pulled on his boots, and followed the prints Scout had left in the snow. They led him past tree lines, across a half-frozen stream, and into a familiar clearing near the forest's edge. And there, Jack saw something that would only happen once in a lifetime. Scout was sitting. Facing him, just 10 paces away, was the bobcat mother. No growling. No tension. Just two beings, once bonded in an unthinkable moment, now meeting again with silent understanding. Scout didn't bark. The bobcat didn't snarl. Forest winds swept gently between them, whispering a greeting from nature itself. Then, from a nearby thicket, 3 figures emerged. The bobcat's cubs, now nearly grown, nearly her size. They approached Scout the way they once had, noses twitching, tails flicking. One reached out and touched its nose to his, like time had never passed. Jack didn't move. He knew this moment wasn't his to break. It was a greeting. A recognition. A goodbye. After a few long, poetic minutes, the bobcat mother let out a low, warm sound, something Jack had never heard from a wild cat before. Her cubs immediately turned and slipped into the woods. But before she followed, the mother looked back at Scout one last time, her gaze no longer that of a stranger, but of a mother. Scout remained still. Then, as the wild family disappeared into the brush, he turned and ran back to Jack, eyes bright, tail wagging like a soft song. Jack crouched down and buried his face into Scout's fur, whispering, "You've got a family in the forest. And you've got one here. Lucky for you, you don't have to choose." The final note. The following spring, when wildflowers bloomed and songbirds returned to the pines, Jack walked the woods with Scout and Rusty, like always. Scout led the way, ears perked at every sound. He paused at bushes where old bobcat prints lingered, sniffed gently, and moved on. Jack watched him and smiled. "You're the bridge, kid. Between forest and man. Between instinct and kindness. You're the little miracle in this world that can feel so cruel." Prince **, a puppy once abandoned. A bobcat mother who did the unthinkable. And an old man who thought he'd lived out his life in solitude. They met. They saved each other. And reminded the world that, in the forest, where laws seem carved in blood and silence, sometimes compassion is still the loudest voice of all. Asterisk.